Well, welcome back to Bread and Butter, where we are serving up the basics for Hearthstone improvement. Welcome to episode 107. Doc is not here this week. We'll talk about that next week, that's for sure. But instead, I was able to get the wonderful Ron Mexico to join us this week. Ron is a Hearthstone streamer that you should all know. He has participated in Master Store and is on the board of THL. Ron, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing good, Tito. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. And having Ron, normally I think Ron has always been like a solo person on the show when he's in, and he's dodged Doc 4 times, I think.
But yeah, easy dodge. When you asked me to join the show, I sort of assumed that Doc wouldn't be around because that's our pattern. But funny enough, we have actually done a show with me and World 8 together with you before.
Oh, that's right. And that's our other guest. World 8 is joining us today because I figured, if we're going to talk about new decks, who else to have on than the person that Zacho mentions every week on the VS podcast, it seems. It's World 8. How are you?
Doing well. I'm not convinced that Ron is a separate person here than Doc. There's no proof, but I'm doing well.
It's true.
Yeah. How about you,
that is
Tito?
True. They're never in the room at the same time. I'm actually doing really, really good. But what I want to know, first off, is Mr. 8, what have you been doing inside of Hearthstone this fantastic week?
This week, in particular, I couldn't really find something that I was happy with since the mini set launched. I gotten really cozy with Handbuff Paladin right before the mini set. And then it launched and I don't know. I just couldn't. I was really excited for like Zerg Hunter and stuff like that, and then I just getting blown out of the water. And I just kind of like took a back seat. But this last day or two, I've been playing a ton of Handbuff Hunter. I think it's the build I have. The new build is really interesting. Kind of is a little bit of the Grunter, but also has Zerg stuff in it. So you make like these huge Zerglings on like 3. Like come down with a pair of like 9/7s. So pretty excited about that. Gonna keep pushing it, and it's nice to find a deck that I liked because I was kind of spinning my wheels for most of the week here.
Fair enough. And Ron, as a former Hunter main, I think you're kind of more of a well-rounded person than you were when I first started watching you. What do you think? Is that a good deck? What have you been doing in Hearthstone?
Former. Hold on. Slow down. So I recently started doing just a little bit of deck rouletting for the mini set while I was streaming, just because I figured I should add in some variety and people might want to see more decks outside of just, the group of Hunter decks that I've been kind of tinkering with. There's a few of them. I still have been really enjoying a lot of different Hunter stuff, primarily Discover with like a Zerg package has been kind of the thing that I'm gravitating towards. And I'm still trying to find my way towards a build that feels the best, but I think we're getting there. It's pretty tough to deal with some of the higher tier stuff, I think, that's rising to the top right now. But outside of Hunter, a bunch of different things that seem kind of cool. Like we've got competitive Death Knight decks. Shaman is kind of dominating. There's Warlock that's not bad. There's Mage that's not bad. I've even started playing a little bit of Paladin from a new deck that Glory made. That's pretty sweet. It's a very aggressive focused, like Starship board swarming type deck. It's cool, and I like that one. And that's kind of a very recent new deck that I added to the mix. And then I tried to play a little bit of Demon Hunter, and oh my god, it's bad. But yeah, most of the other things are reasonably competitive, and it makes for some entertaining variety.
Fantastic. And we'll definitely dive into all of this a little bit more in detail in our main topic. But I'm in week 2 of a new job, and it is fantastic. I'm really kind of excited. I haven't been able to do anything because I don't have all the access I need yet, and it's a slow moving process. But I've been spending time with the team that I'll be working with, and I'm learning a lot about what I will be doing. And the bar is so low for what I'm going to need to do to succeed that it's going to be so much better when I actually perform as I plan on performing. And if the bar is like a 2, and I'll do like a 9 or whatever like that. It's going to be great, and everybody on my team is just fantastic, and there's no just about nobody I'm kind of like worried about at all. So it's exciting, and doing the whole traveling down for work because I'm staying where I'm working during the week, and then I come home on the weekend to see the family and do the things. And this is week 2 of that. So far, so good. Little worried about getting paid next week because there's glitches in the system. And not that it won't, not that I'm not going to get paid for those two, for the last 2 weeks, but it's just, am I going to get paid on time because of these glitches? So, which normally wouldn't be a big deal, except that, I haven't really been working since last May. So give me that paycheck. Let me, get that breath of fresh air. Because as they say, you're never really officially working somewhere until you have an ass and chair and a paycheck in the bank. We're halfway there. So I'm just looking forward to that. But anyway, just did my outside of Hearthstone. Inside of Hearthstone, I have been not playing a ton. I streamed Tuesday and Wednesday, and I played a lot there. We gave away some codes thanks to Blizzard. Ridiculous Hat just, out of the blue was like, hey, you want to give away some codes? I was like, oh, yes, I do. So that was fun. We played a lot of weird decks. I tried making Paladin work. I actually had some decent success with it because I just don't think people are used to seeing it, but I know that it's not great, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, I haven't played a ton, but I've played enough where I've had some fun with the new sets, and I think it's better than I thought it was going to be, because as much as I was excited about Starcraft, I was kind of worried it was just going to be a complete miss. And I wasn't worried, but I wasn't looking at the set saying this is going to be a complete miss. I was worried that it would hit and then it just wouldn't be impactful, and then we'd be sad. But it seems to be pretty impactful. So I'm excited about that. But Ron, what have you been doing outside of Hearthstone?
Lately, I've been taking care of my parents' dog. They went on a trip and they needed me to look after her. She's a 10-month-old puppy. I'm looking after her for 5 weeks, and it's exhausting. She's she's she doesn't like to let me sleep, basically ever. So I probably the last, like, I don't know, close to a week. We're like 1 week in. I've maybe got around like 5 hours of sleep total each day. So I think she's eroded a little bit of my filter in saying things that I wouldn't normally say. So we'll see if that makes it a more interesting podcast or not. But it's okay. I'm just looking forward to February 21st when I can give my parents their dog back, and also maybe not plan on getting a puppy ever.
Well, I always think that anyone before you have a child should have a puppy first, just to see if they can handle the basics of having a baby, which is having a puppy, and then you add not there's more to having a baby than what a puppy does, but it's always it's a good start, because then, as you know, you're not getting a lot of sleep. It's more work than you would think it is. But we have to know name of the dog and what's the breed.
Well, I won't actually say her name because she's sleeping behind me, and if I say her name, she will wake up and then she'll be a terror again. So you're gonna have to wonder. I can spell it. Bella. You guys can say it. I just don't want her to hear it. And she is a Maltipoo. She's a mix between a Maltese and a poodle.
Wow, that's pretty good. And World 8, you've recently started a new job too. How is your life going outside of Hearthstone?
Life is good. Yeah, I started a new job about 2 months ago, but December was pretty low key. A lot of people were like had vacation and stuff, so January really ramped up after everybody came back. But otherwise, my son just had a surgery last week. Nothing was a problem. He just he had like baby sleep apnea his whole life. He's 2. And so they took out his adenoids, they shaved his tonsils. They don't actually take tonsils out anymore because you need them. So they just they kind of reduce them. So that was mostly what we've been dealing this week is pain management for him. But otherwise, life is good, and it's cold where we are, and I'm okay with it. I actually like the cold. We live in a pretty temperate area where it's just like freezing rain all winter, and I'm like, give me some snow, and we actually got snow this year, so I'm actually pretty happy with that. I like to see the snow, but yeah, life's been good.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the cold weather, which is, you might ask why I live in New England. It's just kind of because this is where I live. I do like having winter because it makes me appreciate summer and spring and fall that much more. But I do not like the cold. I do not like the cold at all. And I've been to one of the hottest places on earth, right, in the Middle East. So I prefer it there than I do in the. Well, I don't prefer being there, but I'd rather have the temperature there than to be like a negative 10 degrees and 40-mile-an-hour winds and me wondering like when I'm going to feel my face again. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Hearthstone and the new Starcraft mini set. So first off, let's just get general opinions, and we're going to talk about each class. So don't worry. World 8, how do you think the flavor of the set is? How do you think just like the cards are? Are you happy? Did they have a win here? What do you think?
I think the flavor was always a win when I saw the cards. And initially, I'll be honest, I was a pretty big doubter that the power level was there. Like I was looking at it like, but is this really stronger than, like Unkiliax? And we can get more into that later. And the answer is kind of like no, but it's still a lot of fun, and there's still some good power to be had. So I think they did a really good job. I think this landed a lot better than the original Great Dark Beyond. I've been very surprised this last week with how decks are appearing. Again, I'd kind of written everything off in the first, 24 hours or something. Like, oh, this isn't get stale fast. But I always tell other people don't do that, so I shouldn't have done it myself. I think it's really cool, and I only played StarCraft 1, and that was a long time ago. And as far as I can tell, though, the fans are having fun with it, and I like it. I think there was some concern, like we're going outside of Hearthstone for this content, and you talk a lot about that with like Magic the Gathering. They're really going big on outside the scope of what the game originally was, but it still feels very Hearthstone. And I think that was a huge win, that it didn't feel like a completely different direction.
Fantastic. Okay, and now Ron, how about your thoughts on the mini set?
Yeah, I think you make a great point with how like it still feels very in line with what you want it to be for Hearthstone cards. I know there was a lot of concern heading into the mini set, like, oh, it's a different IP, and this opens some doors we don't want to walk through. And maybe that could be the case in the future where they're like, oh, well, StarCraft worked, so other things will work. I think StarCraft was uniquely positioned to work for not only Hearthstone, but also the flavor of the expansion in the first place and the direction that they were going. And, there was already like previously established lore stuff with the Draenei and other worlds and space and so on. So it kind of felt like a pretty cool natural fit and the time to introduce it. As far as the gameplay and the mechanics themselves, they are also stronger than I thought they would be at first glance. I don't know how different that might have been if Oracle had not been nerfed at the same time as the mini set was coming out, because we had Cycle Rogue that was honestly just strangling the meta, and everything that was even like theoretically playable really wasn't because of Cycle Rogue. So it's kind of like this two-pronged effect of, hey, there's a lot of brand new cards that are fun to play with and interesting, and people are going to gravitate towards that and want to play it because it's something new. And also at the same time, this completely dominant deck had a major enabler that got nerfed to the point that now this is also going to take a back seat while other things are stepping forward. But the flavor was fantastic. And the decks are interesting and cool. There's so much more new stuff. And I've heard a lot of people saying that this feels more like an expansion than the actual Great Dark Beyond expansion did when it launched. And I have to agree with that. It's just, it feels so different and refreshing. We'll see if it sticks. I mean, it's Hearthstone. There's always going to be like patterns that we kind of settle into and older decks that people recognize, oh, this is the stronger thing, so I'm going to play this. But I would call it a success, at least for now.
And I think that the starships actually being viable is probably where that feeling comes from, right? Because all the starships we have now seem to be pretty decent. And previously, it was a struggle to get starships working in a way that was relevant. So,
right. Just imagine if starships had been good on expansion launch, they would be disturbingly strong now because of the support that they got. So it makes sense. And I think we might have even talked about this in a different show as a different topic when it comes to the design of the expansion and the mini set. Those things are designed at the same time and they're designed to work together, but the mini set has a massive delay. So you don't really get to see the meta as it's intended until the mini set comes out, and there's so many balance patches and nerfs and buffs and changes before the mini set releases. You never really see what the intended design was ever going to actually be. So everyone who was complaining starships are way too bad, they're not playable enough, you just had to wait. Just had to wait till the mini set, and hey, they're good now.
Yep, agreed. And it's kind of like when they changed the rewards track for the first time, everyone was super upset, and they were like, "Don't worry, in the future, like there's going to be these events and these things. It's going to balance things out. It's going to be great." And it probably was right, but it's hard to understand what's coming if you can't see it. And yeah, when I saw this set come out, I was like, yeah, it looks like this is why starships were underwhelming, because if they were stronger, they probably would have been a problem when this set launched. And they wanted this to be really impactful. I'm assuming that this was a lot of work behind the scenes, and this was something that like needed to hit, and it feels like it has. So I don't know if I'm going to be spending any money on all these hero skins, these diamond hero skins that seem to be very, very expensive. But yeah, one thing I didn't like, and I think I mentioned this last week, I want to validate. One thing I don't like is if you have the Kerrigan Diamond skin or whatever, and you then play the Kerrigan Hero card, you just get the kind of boring Kerrigan Hero as compared to the Diamond. Whereas, like, if you already had the Diamond, you play the Hero, you should probably keep that Diamond Hero skin with a new hero power or something. I think that that's something they kind of could have done, given how much those things cost and given that there's so much synergy there. But you know, whatever. So let's start with what I grouped these up by the what do you call it? I don't know how you say it. The nomenclature, the Zerg, the Protoss, and the Terran. So we're gonna start with
factions.
Factions. Sure. So Zerg is, I think, the one that everyone kind of knows. You think Zerg Rush, even if you don't play Starcraft, you've probably heard Zerg Rush if you're a gamer at all. And I think this was the one thing that the most people were excited about. I would say it had the most hype. Like, I wonder what Zerg is going to be like. And Death Knight, Demon Hunter, Hunter, and Warlock are the ones that got Zerg. So let's start with Death Knight. I think right now there's a couple different versions of Zerg Death Knight. You got Frost Unholy and Rainbow as, I think, the primary decks. And I have a friend, a real life friend who plays Hearthstone. His name is Toner, and I typically use him as a barometer for how kind of like the normal person that's not overly engaged in Hearthstone feels about the set and the cards and all that. And he says he seems to think this is a pretty big problem. I haven't run into it too often, but I know that it seems pretty strong. Worldy, why don't you kick us off? How is Death Knight, and do we think that it's too strong, or do we think it's just right or interesting? What are your thoughts?
I think Death Knight actually, they did a really great job with the Zerg. It definitely feels like this never-ending swarm, right? And I feel like the power level is actually pretty reasonable after a few days. It looked super strong, the first day, but it's really just kind of one card, Infester, which is kind of nuts. Which is a +1/+1 for the Zerg for the rest of the game. That's kind of like if you find that card, you're probably going to win. Everything else seems really well balanced. And other than Kerrigan is a pretty nutty hero. But in terms of like flavor, if we take a look at something else like the Baneling Barrage, like that seems like a very reasonable card in terms of Death Knight. Like it does this cool board effects, interacts well with the spawning pool, which is just a terrific card. Like I think spawning pools was probably the slam dunk for Zerg across all the classes. Just a really solid one drop, and the Death Rattle enabling Rush on that particular turn makes for a lot of really good gameplay. So, I'm glad that there are cards like Viper that are actually not that much stronger, but are still like played. But it's really just, I think the power outlier is probably Infester, and it's specifically because the Death Knight gets reborn, and so everything comes back kind of like just almost the same size it was. And as someone who likes playing Horn of the Windlord and Amatus and cards that are the mini from Tarum, and being like, oh well, the Zergling is still a 5/5. That was a little pointless. It's a little frustrating. But I think the power level is actually pretty reasonable, in my opinion.
How about yourself, Ron? What are your thoughts on Death Knight?
Yeah, it looked really powerful in the earliest days of the expansion. I think Pocket Train even went ahead and took a Frost version, a double Frost version, with one Unholy, so it could run Reska, and took that Death Knight Zerg deck, just kind of dominating. But it is really just that one card that kind of makes everything go. And there's plenty of ways to answer it. So when it started getting totally out of hand, there was a lot of reactions to that as far as tools to answer it. I mean, there's ways to steal the minion, there's ways to silence the minion, so on. Even just something like playing Bob to take the minion, give your opponent 3 coins, and now they can't do the thing that they're going to do. And the success of the deck pretty much revolves around playing that minion with the Death Rattle, and then making sure that you can spread its Death Rattle to other things and giving it Reborn and bringing it back, and basically just triggering that over and over and over, so your Zerg minions get buffed crazy out of control. And they get around all of those, set opponent's minion health or attack or whatever to X amount. Doesn't matter, because they have a persistent buff that just kind of stacks on top of that. So you can't do anything. Also, fun fact, it does not carry over to your side, obviously. If you think about it, it makes perfect sense. But if you just look at the cards on the board and you see, say, like a 15 attack minion, and you play Grifta, and you take the steal option from Grifta for a turn, you're like, oh, I'm about to do 15 damage to my opponent, and then it's a 3 attack because you did not make all of yours more powerful through the whole game. So that's a funny thing to find out in real time, and you're like, oh yeah, if I had paid closer attention, I would have absolutely known that. Now I feel really stupid.
And it also fails the Horn of the Windlord test, right?
Yeah, like World 8 was mentioning, there's just so many other things. You can't really do anything to lessen its stats. You just have to clear the boards. But you can stop it completely by either being faster than they are, or having some counterplay to the one card that makes everything go. So I don't think it is overly problematic. I think it'll settle into maybe something like a tier 2 deck where it's reasonably strong. And also, it's important to note that this deck gets a lot weaker post-rotation, because so many of the things that really enable it, like Death Growl and Reska and Yodeler, are all going to be rotating.
Fair enough. So moving on to the next Zerg class, I think the match made in heaven, honestly, was Zerg and Demon Hunter, right? Because Demon Hunters is always, you want to be aggressive. It just has that right feeling. They've been Tokenie before. Uh, they had to have nailed this. So how are we looking, Ron, on the Demon Hunter? This has got to be the best decks in the game, right?
Close. Almost. Just a little bit off. And by that I mean maybe the worst deck in the game. Or up there. Completely unplayable. I've tinkered with a few things for Demon Hunter just to see if I can make anything like Zerg related work. And it's not even necessarily like it's that terrible. It's just lacking in so many ways to compete with the other stronger things that are happening. You can't kill your opponents fast enough. You can't stick boards well enough. And you can't really play any kind of longer game plan either. So it kind of, for me, it just fell flat on its face, where I think that is the one like Zerg class that is complete garbage. Maybe that'll change. Maybe somebody innovates a good new deck that no one else has been able to find, or maybe nerfs or buffs happen. But I think Demon Hunter is going to remain pretty bad until the next expansion.
Well, we have a fantastic deck builder on the show right now. So, World 8, what do you got for us in Demon Hunter? You figured it out, right?
No, I haven't figured it out. I haven't put too much effort into it. Basically, days 1 and 2, I was trying to play Zerglings and tokens, and missile turrets just kept clearing me, or Banelings kept getting me, or just general board clears. And it just felt like it wasn't really worth it. Like, I might as well have just been playing Attack Demon Hunter and hitting him in the face and not worrying about the board at all. Because honestly, I feel like this might actually be a deck that translates well into a 4-set meta. Creep Tumor is pretty strong card, actually. Little mini Crusader Order for Zerg. And I actually like Lurker more than most, mostly because it also does 2 damage when it attacks. But right now the power level is just not there. And it's hard to justify it as an aggressive deck when there's a lot of other better options, because it just gets its board cleared and you don't have the over-the-top damage unless you start focusing on the attack stuff. And then why aren't you doing that in the first place? So I think thematically, yeah, it's there. It's aggressive. It's good. But in the past, we had to basically have, I think the last token Demon Hunter that was good was actually hard carried by Drekthar, if I remember correctly. Like, otherwise, or maybe Outcast Demon Hunter. Yeah, Outcast Demon Hunter would be the last one. And that was carried by Hawkstrider Rancher, making really sticky boards. So the boards aren't sticky here. You get cleared and you're kind of done. So it's unfortunately has not landed.
Let me ask you two this. If Mutalisk, which is the 4-mana 5/2, also damages minions next to this, whomever attacks, and the enemy hero if the neighbor is missing. So if like you hit it on the side, it'll also hit the hero. If this had Rush, is this a different story?
No.
Okay.
Still terrible.
Fair.
But that card would be a lot better, and maybe people would be a little bit more tempted to play it. I understand why they'd give Mutalisk Rush, because they thought it might be too strong. But no, there aren't enough supporting pieces. If you take one good card and put it in a deck full of garbage, you still have a garbage deck.
Fair enough. All right. So Hunter, what are we doing in Hunter? But let's start with the Hunter main. Ron?
So very early on, Hunter, surprisingly, was the class that got Shafar banned. I thought it was going to be Rogue that got Shafar banned or nerfed. Well, I didn't think he'd get banned, but nerfed or something, changed. And I'm sure that they will do a change on Shafar soon, and then that card will return from its banned status, and we might see the meta shift again, because no matter what they decide to change, Hunter might still be able to kind of make that go crazy with all of the tutors, discounts for Zerglings, buffs, more buffs, and so on, which is kind of what the day one craziness was, where there was a lot of Shafar Hunter, and it seemed to be making incredible amount of stats way early. once that got banned, things kind of needed to shift to just mainly what was working before with Hunter, which was Discover, I found. And then Discover Hunter with a Zerg package has kind of been like the main thing. And there's a really cool new innovation with that. Maybe cool for now, maybe frustrating and irritating later. But turns out the giant that can get discounted by locations is all of a sudden really, really good because of the interaction with Spawning Pool and Parrot Sanctuary. So the dream now would be essentially you draw the, it's not a sea giant, but sea is in the name, seaside maybe. I can't remember the name of it. But it's a regular giant cost 8 mana, I think, or 10, one of those. And it discounts by 2 each time you click the location. So you can Spawning Pool on 1 and click it. You can Parrot Sanctuary on 2 and click it. And then on turn 3, when your Spawning Pool wakes up again, you get to play a 0 mana Zergling, click the Parrot Sanctuary, your next Zergling is free. You click that location, you play that one, you click the Parrot Sanctuary again. All of a sudden, the giants are completely free. So you have 2 giants in your hand. By turn 3, you are dropping 2 0 mana 8/8s on a board that also includes Zerglings with Rush. It's a pretty powerful inclusion to what already had some good options. And Kerrigan just being a very powerful card. Some Zerg stuff with Hydralisk has been good. I haven't seen a whole lot else. World 8 will probably tell you a little bit about his Grunter experiments, which I'm excited to hear about too, because I have not run into any of that on ladder. Mainly I've seen like just Discover stuff work, and even the aggro focused Zerg Hunter not really doing enough because, well, sort of the Demon Hunter problem that we already mentioned and World 8 brought up as far as like board clears go, with DK doing Banelings and Shaman playing the missile card. Just, all these 1 health minions just get so easily cleared so quickly that you can't really do any kind of flood the board, with small minions strategy and make it work out. It's a little bit of experimentation with Saddle Up that I saw, but even then it didn't seem to be good enough because you just have to draw the Saddle Up and do the board flood play, and every other game that you don't do that, your board gets cleared and you're done. So aggro, not really doing great, but Discover stuff looks decent, and Shafar probably a looming threat, and whatever Grunter experimentation I'm excited to hear about.
Yeah, I played a little bit of Hunter, and I wanted to work in more of the Discover package into the Zergs. And Pilot was like, "That's a dumb idea." So Pilot, I guess you're wrong.
Well, I mean, he's right that they're at least like, I get probably the concept that he has is like there's heavy anti-synergy with changing your hero power to changing your hero power again.
Yeah.
So it can be really awkward with when do I play Exarch Niall? When do I play Kerrigan? Both cards are really strong. Both of them do totally opposite things for what I'm trying to do in this game. But you can have 2 of them and you can pivot your strategy to different things as the game suits you. It's a much more challenging thing, and sometimes is difficult to make work.
That sounds like it's good for mid-range, right? So World 8, tell us about Grunt Zerg.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just touching on a little bit of what Ron was saying, trying to play the new cards, and just putting them into the deck, it works pretty well, but it's not really proven to be, significantly better. I think the Seaside Giant thing is really cool. That basically, the new location is just so low and clicky that it enables this card that otherwise wouldn't see play, and actually adds to a deck that might have just been like, I don't really care about the mini set. If you look at decks, you could the old lists are doing just as well as the Zerg lists. But I think, and I just want to touch on this really quick. that Hunter is kind of the first class we're going to talk about that kind of wants to go infinite sometimes with Ceaseless and Fizzle and stuff. We were seeing that before the mini set, but I've been seeing that a lot more now. Shaman's doing it, Warrior's doing it. It seems to be this strong tendency to anything that's going slightly late to at least have a Fizzle plan in the pocket. But as for what I've been working on, so basically I took the old Grunter list and I was like, well, there's 4 useless cards in here. What happens if we put Spawning Pools and Kerrigan in? And then I just put the Worm in because, there's a new card. And then I realized that, if you play Spawning Pools on 1 and then you go Cup of Muscle, your Zergling's really big all of a sudden. You got a duplicate of them. Or you go like Spawning Pool on 1 and then coin, reserve spot. You've got a pair of 5/5s on 2, which is pretty good because at certain matchups like Druid, Weapon Rogue, you just need to get on the board. You don't have time to force on Grunt these decks. You gotta just like kind of kill them. Or, and again, kind of like Spawning Pool on 1, Cup of Muscle, and then on 3 you do the reserve spot. Now your Zergling's a 9/7 on 3, and then you've got the rest of your game to be doing Discover stuff and eventually OTKs and stuff like that. So I feel like it adds another element to the deck that's kind of interesting. Like a little bit of like, do I lean into like the Shafar plan of just like huge Zerglings early on that are just like ridiculously statted? Or do I lean into like the Warsaw Grut, which is really good right now, into the Shaman in particular, because the Shaman's making all these little 2/1s and pop-up books. And, if you put like you give them a 0/4, they don't know what to do with it. They don't like, it just takes up a board slot. And, I've been doing really well into that particular deck, which is, I'm seeing a lot of that. That's probably half my matches. So, I was kind of incentivized to find a deck that does well into it. And, it's been very satisfying to just like, they're sitting there, they know it's coming. And I'm like, oh yeah, you can't do damage. You're hitting me with 2/1s. Like, I'll sit here all day and I'll OTK you on 7 because you really didn't do anything to pressure me. But that's been kind of like my own little oh yeah. And Kerrigan, if the opponent doesn't play anything on the board, you just slam Kerrigan and now they have to do something because otherwise Kerrigan's just gonna like by itself solo an empty board. So anyway, that's what I've been working on. And again, it's for me, I try to find fun in the game, and a lot of that is finding a deck that I like to play, but also that feels like it's mine. And this one feels like it's mine now, even though it was an archetype that was already existing. I had played it before. I was like kind of on it, but now just putting a little bit of a spin on it, and it feels like there's a lot more lines of play, which is always good for me. But that's enough of my own little like personal self promotion there. But I'm enjoying it, and maybe I'll probably share it after this and see if other people like it too.
I like that. I think that's important to have a deck where you're like, this has flexibility, and that's a big appeal.
Agreed. And I think Ron would like your list, and I would like your list as well. So Rogue, we have Archon Rogue, but that, as fun as it seems, hasn't seemed to hit. Cycle Rogue seems to be dead, yay, but Weapon Rogue seems to be the only thing people are doing in Rogue right now. Am I wrong about that? Or Worldy, what do you think about the Rogue?
Did you want to cover all the Zerg before you move on to Protoss?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You skip
yes.
Warlock.
I just skipped in the wrong spot. You're right. Let's go back to Warlock. So Warlock, everyone was kind of expecting Zerg was going to bring back the, Zoo Lock kind of archetype, and they went in the completely opposite direction. And a lot of people were down on Warlock coming into the set because of how it was not what people were expecting, but it seems to have hit okay. So, Mr. 8, what do you think on Warlock here?
Oh man, I think collectively we all real whiffed on the Ultralisk Cavern. Like everyone was like, this card is terrible. But it's enabled like this location Warlock. Basically your old like, we're making giants and we're duplicating them, or we're just slamming a whole bunch of giants on like 5/6. So we've seen this before with like Handlock. Like Wheel Lock had it with like Forge of Wills, and now we're leaning into it even more. And it's definitely been the deck that surprised me the most. I thought it was going to be a little meme at first, but it seems to have some good staying power, and mostly because it has a really huge turn 5, turn 6 swing turn that a lot of the decks right now are not prepared to handle. Kind of similar to what the Cycle Rogue was doing, which is like, all right, I've got 3 giants on 5, like almost every game. What are you going to do about it? And a lot of decks just don't have a great answer every game. Like sometimes they do have a good answer, but the the Zerg package, I think, was in initial impressions, like everyone thought Warlock would be completely dead. And I'm glad it's not. And this is actually kind of the gameplay that I like to see out of Warlock. Like, we're going to, cheat this in a really weird, unique way. I like Giant Warlock. I played in Wild and stuff like that. So I'm happy to see it. I haven't played much of the deck myself because I'm kind of off in my own little corner playing with the deck that I've been trying to tinker with. But I think it's great for it to be out there in the meta.
Ron?
Yeah, I have played a little bit of the location warlock deck. It doesn't seem to be any other warlock decks that are out there right now, but I mean it's good to have variety in competitively viable classes, and it feels like, warlock is something that can make up that mix where it's actually decent. Which is very surprising for a lot of people based on what the cards look like in the mini set and people's first impressions. Like, oh, that's terrible. Oh, Warlock is dead. It's not going to be playable at all. It already wasn't really playable prior to the mini set, so people didn't think the mini set was going to save it. But yeah, no, it's quite good. I think it also benefits dramatically from Oracle being nerfed and Cycle Rogue no longer existing. And that is, there's a huge thing that was keeping it at bay that people maybe aren't just giving enough credit as to part of the reason why we had this emergence of the location warlock. Because one of the prevailing strategies now seems to be a lot of decks going with like a fizzle package and going infinite and stuff, but Warlock has the perfect answer to infinite gameplay where you can never kill them through all of their armor and they'll eventually beat you with their boards. Well, guess what? We're going to play Wheel and the game is just going to say I win in 5 turns. And then I'm going to try not to die. And you have to pressure me with your control-y fizzle deck. So good luck with that. And in the meantime, like you mentioned, you already have gameplay patterns that are just good in multiple situations where you're cheating out giants early and you're making big boards of big statted things. The Ultralisk has Rush, and Forge of Wills has Rush, and we're seeing a major resurgence in Sargeras as an incredibly powerful card to deal with starship things. Nobody's playing Reno because it's complete trash now. After getting nerfed. So there aren't really very many answers that exist to starships. But one very huge answer to any gigantic starship type board or pieces of starships that want to get assembled is send them all to the Twisting Nether. And they all disappear. So Warlock has a lot of really interesting, good tools that deal with some of the emerging strategies. And I think it'll remain a viable deck for the foreseeable future with the meta being as it is right now. So Warlock's got some exciting things going on, and it's kind of cool to see.
Agreed. And are we worried about it like Cycle Rogue though? Because like you were saying, you pop up giants on turn 5, 6, kind of like Cycle Rogue. Is it different? Is it the same? Like, should we be concerned?
Well, no, I mean, it doesn't do the thing in the same way that Rogue does, because one crucial thing that Rogue was doing while developing all those giants is it was also clearing whatever board you made, no matter how big it was, because they would go Oracle and prep and or Oracle and Tarslick and prep and fan, and then step the Oracle and then play the Oracle and then do more clearing and then giant and then breakdance and then giant. So they were giving their giant rush while developing the giant too. So if you had anything surviving, they were clearing that too. So all of those things were happening around like turn 5 or 6, and they made, 4 8/8s or something. And it's like, guess what? The game is over. There's nothing you can do. But Warlock doesn't do that. They don't clear insane boards while making insane boards all at the same time at an unreasonably early pace.
Fair enough. All right, well, that's Zerg, and we'll move on to Protoss. Unless anybody has anything else they want to talk about Zerg.
No, I think
Okay,
Nope.
yeah, well covered.
Yeah, Zerg is cool.
All right, so Protoss. Okay, Protoss. Dungar Druid seems to be the only Druid that came out of anything. There's no Starcraft Druid being played at all. What's going on here, there, World 8?
Oh man, you have not been caught up in the last 6 hours of meta development, have you?
Yeah, hold up. There's something new.
There's something new. So, first of all, we'll get the Dungar out of the room because it's probably the best Druid deck. Like, just, old Dungar, no new cards, huge power spike on 5/6. Very hard for a lot of decks to deal with on Kiliax. You have to specifically run like Mind Control tech in your list, which I'll be honest, I wouldn't be surprised to see more and more of that. If we keep seeing starships and Dungar and stuff like that, it's a super effective response to it. But Dungar has this huge power spike. Most decks can't deal with it. There was a very small note that they fixed a bug where the Protoss hero was not getting buffed by Groovy Cat. That has now been fixed, and so Groovy Cat will now give the hero power +1 attack, and that also will give the minion the additional attack. So as of like today, even after the bug was fixed, people have started experimenting with that, and it seems to be actually very good. Because what you can do is you can get the 4 mana 3/4 charge, and all you're looking to do is get the pre-nerf innervate, the 0 mana, 2 free mana crystals, and the hero power. And then you just go to town with like pyroblasting them, or not pyroblasting, like fireballing them to the face with your attacks every turn. And it seems to be pretty good. So we'll see what that ends up like looking like. But definitely looks like potential tier 2, and that's a brand new deck. So, I think it's pretty cool. I don't know about the ramping stuff. Seems to be okay. We'll just ramp into Dungar instead. But this hero focused deck, I think it's kind of cool.
Yes, I have not played in the last 6 hours, so I guess I did miss this. Ron, go ahead.
I started to think just now when you mentioned that, Dungar is probably the stronger option, and unfortunately it pretty much is highly likely to be the stronger option. It made me think we don't really have any competitive announcement yet for Hearthstone for the new year, except for the fact that they announced that January ladder won't count. And that actually now makes me a little bit concerned that part of why we're seeing more fun is there's not a competitive season right now, so people aren't completely gravitating towards the absolute strongest thing that they can possibly think of. So other more innovative, cooler decks might just disappear because there's a stronger deck. That being said, we don't need to say anything about Dungar. Dungar is what it is. Hopefully they just kill that card at some point, because God, it is just the antithesis of fun to me. But I guess some people like it, and they'll probably keep it around. Whatever, sure. That's my 2 cents on it. But the new deck for Druid that very recently developed, it does just a crazy hero power thing. All you need to do is have a minion stick or have a way to get a charge minion. And then you do the Groovy Cat thing with Artanis's hero power. And you're playing Sing-Along Buddy as well with that. So there's also Sing-Along Buddy and Refresh, the hero power. All those cards exist from like the old hero power Druid that had a little bit of play, but never really got too much going on. That is an interestingly competitive, decent option, at least for right now. Who knows if that's because it's too new and it's catching people off guard, or other reasons. But I mean, it's a lot of damage. You can do a lot of damage just all at once, and you get countered by taunts, but there are ways through taunts. So you can just kind of set up your game plan. As long as they're not killing you before you do your thing, you can easily do, upwards of, I think, a full 30 damage just to take someone out in one shot with the minion and hero power from your face and the minion attacking them. So it's interesting. we'll see how it plans to survive meta developments.
And that's where it's always interesting too, right? Like you were saying, like it may not be the best deck, it may not even be a good deck, but if it beats like the top two decks, then it finds a home. And then when the meta kind of shifts, it might be good, it might be not, and it all depends on the breakdowns and how it fares against whatever it replaces. So that's interesting. I'm looking forward to trying that. That sounds fun. I always liked Hero Power Mage, so uh, I'm sure, and it'd be interesting to see how something like that works with like Guff the Tough or whatever, and you get all that going. But yeah, no, it sounds like fun. So we also have Priest and Protoss Priest. I have not played this deck yet. Ron, how's Protoss Priest? What do we like? Do we like it?
I mean, I've heard people say that they thought it was kind of interesting and might be decent. I barely saw any of it, and I only saw it in the early days, and I beat it every time I played it. Did not seem very strong to me. They kept like setting up for, oh wow, this is gonna be really powerful soon, and then the gonna be really powerful soon play that they did was this really expensive taunt that they discounted to be really cheap that doesn't impact the board after it dies, and you just get through it and you beat them. So yeah, I don't know. It doesn't look good right now to me. I don't know if Priest has maybe some other options control focused wise for other meta developments later, but yeah, looks not great, which I don't mind. I'm not a big fan of Priest, as you may know.
Decks that are almost there are like the bane of my existence. There's a reason why I kept going back to Black Rock and Roll over and over and over again, because it feels like it should be there. It feels like it should be a good deck. It's almost there, and it's just not enough to get it over the finish line. Mr. 8, what are you doing on Priest? You got anything cooking or?
Yeah, I mean, after the first day or two of the mini, I kind of retreated into casual mode, which is super underrated, by the way. There actually is like a casual MMR. So if you play a whole bunch like I do and you take it somewhat seriously, you actually get paired against, like I'll often see like top 200 players in casual mode. I've made friends with them. And then one of the decks that I've been jamming in casual mode, because I wasn't brave enough to take it to ladder, was Protoss Priest based around Sentry. The Sentry looks awful, right? Like it's just this 2 mana, whatever. But if you get like 4 or 5 of them going, and just ignore the whole Warp Gate thing, just pretend that card doesn't exist. The deck actually looks legitimate, like maybe tier 2 even. Charge is good. You get your motherships down to like 6 mana without the Warp Gate. And then all of a sudden, when they pop out these other Protoss minions, they're all 0. So you play your mothership for 6, and then you get a Templar for 0, and you get a Void Raid for 0, and often you roll, like it's a really tight pool, and you'll roll the Mage Colossus, and that'll just end game. So I think there's actually potential there for like a Sentry based deck. There's also a little bit of, just let's play Burn Priest, right? And then just use the charge minions as burn, right? Like, it's still three damage charge. Like that's still good. So that might be the stronger of the two, just, plain old Burn Priest. But I think there is possibility for somewhat slower Protoss deck, but that one's in a very early stages of refinement. But it really impressed me when I took a list someone else had made, and I jammed a few games of it against what I thought were pretty reasonable decks, like, Starship Shaman and stuff like that. It kind of held its own. And I think it's cool. We'll see how it goes.
The funny thing to me is if you want to win games with Priest, you might still just be needing to jam Zarimi still. But I mean, we'll see how things change. Zarimi still probably, to me, seems like the strongest Priest deck, but who knows? Yeah. There's plenty of time to adjust and develop.
Time Warp good.
Yeah.
Time Warp once is good. Time Warp infinity times is not so good. So let's go on to Mage. So what you were saying before, Ron, like how a deck feels like it's just almost there. That's how Mage felt like to me, because I felt like after I played a few games of Mage that I was doing really well, and then I was like 2-5. I was like, oh, maybe I'm not, but it felt like I was doing really good. So, what's the story with Mage there, Ron?
I played a decent amount of the Protoss Mage deck, and honestly, I was impressed by it. I thought it was pretty good. I ran into it once, and I was like, oh my god, this is unbeatable. They just keep gaining armor over and over, and then I know eventually they're going to drop the double Colossus, and I'm going to explode. And that's what happened. And then I played it, and I did the same thing. I just kept gaining lots and lots of armor and playing Protoss spells and clearing boards and stalling until I could drop double Colossus, and then my opponent exploded. So, like, it has a very specific thing that it does, and it has a cap on its damage, which turns out is going to be a pretty big problem for the decks that gain lots of armor and go infinite and exploit starship stuff. So I don't think it will be good enough because of other developments in the meta, but the deck on its own against lots of different matchups looks quite strong, and it's felt good to me when I played it. It might be an almost there deck that isn't really almost there because of the cards that it has access to, but it's almost there because there are things in other classes that are going on that prevent it from reaching its potential. Just with like basically getting a life cap higher than the damage cap. But I don't know. It seems decently competitive to me. Definitely like a playable deck that you can run. Might be closer to tier 3 than tier 2, but it's kind of cool and fun just to do something a little bit different with it. So I like it.
How about you, World 8? Do you like Mage right now?
Oh, I mean, if you want to win, you pick up Mage and you play Elemental Mage. That deck is, if you look at stats,
yeah, unfortunately,
that is a tier 1 deck, seeing less than 1% play because it's old, it's predictable, but man, it's effective, and just no one's playing it. But as for Protoss Mage, the new thing, I completely agree. It feels like it's almost there. Again, I was shy and played the deck casual. But even against like powerful decks, like you get down the Colossus once and you're like, wow, this is very good. But there is kind of like you must be this tall to ride the ride in the meta, and it's not there. Unfortunately, it's like standing on its tiptoes and be like, I could be there, but it's not. So I think it's a lot of fun. And I think some high level players are very interested in the deck, which I think they'll keep cooking with it until they're sick of losing. So maybe we'll find something, but right now it's just kind of tier fun, unfortunately.
Oh right, the cook is probably just more fizzle. It's so annoying. Fizzle is kind of a problem. Fizzle is very irritating because yeah, that's probably what you would do, is find a way to have multiple snapshots and just have even more Protoss spells and more copies of the Colossus for the decks that are trying to beat you by gaining too much armor. You set up even more damage. But yeah, I agree with you that Elemental Mage is the stronger mage right now. It's just so boring. Just in terms of like its gameplay patterns, it's just like it's been around for a bit. It doesn't do anything new or interesting. It's strong, and nobody's playing it because nobody wants to.
Fair enough. All right. We talked about Rogue a little bit. I'll recap. Archon Rogue, fun, bad. Cycle Rogue, dead. Weapon Rogue, real good, and seems to be all over the place. Am I wrong about any of that there, Mr. Mexico?
Not from what I've observed. If you queue into a rogue, it's Weapon Rogue. Like 100% of the time. And other rogues don't exist. Starship stuff, not good enough. Cycle Rogue. I still actually saw somebody trying to play Cycle Rogue, but then they abandoned it. And the next time they were on Rogue, it was Weapon. So I think they kind of acknowledged, no, it's not good enough. Yeah, there just aren't other viable potential options. Archon Rogue, there was like a new Jay Alexander list that was going around a bit that looked like it might be okay, that kind of just leaned in heavier to damage. They just try to chip damage and then do an Archon thing. But it's not fast enough or competitive enough with the real meta tyrants that are, well, mainly just the one Terran deck that we're going to get to soon. But yeah, it can't compete. But Weapon Rogue can, and people don't like losing. So if you like Rogue and you want to win, you're probably queuing Weapon Rogue, and it's just as boring and painful to see existing as it ever was.
Mr. E?
Oh no, I completely agree with that analysis. You have some of the best rogue minds, piling their resources together in the top legend, and even then they're just like, I guess we have to play weapon rogue if we really want to play with Valera. Which
throw up their hands or like, I got nothing.
They got nothing. But it is a stubborn bunch. In the top 1K that love Rogue. So I think they'll keep revisiting it, and I don't know, maybe we'll see Cycle again. It's kind of a cockroach type deck. I don't know, maybe not right now, but in the future. But yeah, Weapon Rogue is a winning deck. It's a cheap deck too. One of the things I did this month actually was I started a brand new account on EU. And I didn't buy any packs or anything like that. And it's something you could put together and win a lot of games with. So I can see the appeal there, even if it's kind of samey game in and game out. Winning is fun. And games are quick.
Fair enough. Maybe we'll even see Macro make a return. But who knows? So let's move on to Terran. Terran has simultaneously the best deck and I think the two worst decks, or the best class and the two worst classes out there. Or maybe that's hyperbole given that we have Demon Hunter. But let's start with Shaman, because that's like the deck that seems to be everywhere. So we went from Swarm Shaman to Battlecruiser Shaman. Worley, what's going on with Shaman and why is this so good?
Well, I might give Ron a big chunk of time here to talk about his thoughts on this, because I've seen him on stream playing against this deck quite a bit, more so than I have. I think it's been really interesting because we came into this mini looking like, well, we're just going to keep playing Swarm Shaman and bloodlusting people, and that deck's actually still strong. Again, one of those decks that's like tier 1, but under 1% play rate, because it's just kind of just not appealing to a large player base. But what's really appealing is the battle cruiser Shaman, with just the ability to create these really powerful battle cruisers with all the 2/1s. And to me, what was the most interesting thing is that it started kind of off as, oh, we're going to take the Swarm Shaman with the backstage bouncers and see what happens if we put in the battle cruiser stuff. And now we're seeing a definite trend towards, well, forget all the Swarm stuff. What we want to do is we want to go infinite with Fizzle and triangulate our snapshot, which is going to have Jim Raynor in it. So we're going to build up this obnoxious Star Cruiser, and we're just going to keep doing that for the rest of the game. And it's one of the easiest Fizzle setups, because you just got to triangulate the snapshot, and the snapshot's got the triangulate in it, and you play Raynor, and it's just ceaseless, and it's a strong deck. It's got a lot of defense, not a lot of offense, which is why I've actually kind of picked up that Grunter Hunter, because I can just kind of build up my combo, and it goes through the Grunter deck can deal like 100 plus damage, right? If your opponent's board's full of like 2/1s. But it armors up well, and I think it's kind of like a control shaman right now, which we've had in the past, but not really like this before. So it's a good deck, new cards. I can't fault anyone for playing it.
Ron?
Yeah. I agree with a lot of what you said there. You've got kind of two different builds, and the builds are kind of changing towards the infinite one. I have my suspicions. I think Dreadeye mentioned recently that he's not even sure that the infinite version is going to be the best one, but it's still going to look something similar to that. Just as far as game plan goes. And there's just a lot of really, really powerful cards. Turns out that starports are really good. Being able to discount your battleship launches are really good. and it, they have a lot of different ways that they can go. We've seen a lot of, like, with Shaman, I never even know exactly which list I'm going to be up against. Shaman has Hex. Shaman has Thrall's Gift for Bloodlust, Hex, and Lightning Storm, all of which are incredible. They have one of the best gift cards in the game. And they also have even things like Conductivity. I've seen a lot of decks go with Conductivity Hex to really completely mess with your boards as like a control angle. That's not even close to like the best thing that's happening in Shaman, but it's just one of many things that they can do. I think Missile Pod is probably one of the best Starship pieces out there, because it does the deal 1 damage to all enemies, also triggers on launch. So if you ever roll the Raven, which you're almost certainly going to with all of the summon 2/1 Starship piece cards, that's kind of all you need, especially if you get 2 of them. It's nearly a guarantee that those 3 bonus effects plus additional 3 bonus effects is going to give you some combination of like lifesteal or poison, and then you're just going to blow up whatever board exists whenever you launch this, or heal to full, even if you're really close to dying. Just so many different ways to survive. People have started putting defense crystals in the deck, which of course is another Starship piece, gains you armor, and then you basically just reach this point where it's like, oh, this Shaman is just totally unkillable, and you don't only have the fizzle and then triangulate the snapshot plan. You can also just play Shutterblock, and Shutterblock can triple your snapshot with fizzle. And you still have Incendious plays with Shutterblock as well, and a whole bunch of other things going on. Obviously, they can go infinite. They can put a ghost in their ETC and disrupt you as another plan. They just have access to nearly everything you would want for nearly every possible situation that the game can throw at you. And I'm looking at HS Guru right now on the top 1K win rates for decks, and the top build of Battlecruiser Shaman through, it's not that many games, 240 something, but it's sitting at a 64% win rate in top 1K Legend, which is honestly insane and completely supports what I've been feeling when I'm queuing into that deck on stream, playing things that are not Battlecruiser Shaman, where I'm like, I can't win. I don't know what to do. I can't win. I recognize it earlier and earlier in each game, where it's like, oh, this, all the pieces that they just got for this Battlecruiser, whenever they decide to click that button to launch it, they've won the game. My only out is that they're so greedy that they don't click the button, and I kill them before they click the button. And then often I'm like, oh shit, they clicked the button. Time to concede. It's like, it's just that strong, because there's not only that one thing that is probably beating you on its own because it's so big and threatening that you have to deal with it right now. It's gonna come back from Raynor, and they're gonna play more Raynor. And they might triple the Raynor with Shutterblock, because that can also happen. So Shaman is doing everything and is an absolute menace in the meta right now. I don't know how to answer it, but maybe World 8 is our hero with Grunter Hunter, and that develops some kind of counter, because I haven't seen another counter. The counter is the mirror. Drawing better in the mirror so far seems to be like the best thing. We'll see how much that might change in the future, but Battlecruiser Shaman, public enemy number 1 for me, I would say, of the current state of the meta in the mini set.
Okay, so when we talked about Death Knight a little while ago, we said it's really strong, but it's not. We didn't feel like it needed, except for one card, maybe a big change. Is Shaman's public enemy number 1 doesn't need to be changed, or do we just need to be better?
I don't know. It's really early. There's lots of meta developments that can happen as people try to figure out how to counter certain things. I don't think that I'm capable of finding the solution to the power level of this deck to actually consistently beat it. But there are plenty of people that are great with deck building that can figure out different angles that might keep the deck in check. And you really just need maybe 1 to 2 counters for a deck before the deck starts to drop a little bit in popularity, and then you can open up at least something more like a rock paper scissors meta, which a lot of metas wind up gravitating towards, where just you have a few decks that kind of rise to the top and alternate, and it's matchup based for whether you're going to win or lose. Maybe it's going to need to be addressed. Maybe there will be some innovations that keep it in check. As of right now, I would say like the win rate that I'm seeing through a limited sample size, if it persists, then it's probably something that needs to be talked about.
World 8, what do you think?
I mean, I might be the one person that's happy to see this deck on the opposing side. In terms of, it's just so well rounded. It's like if you nudge a card, it might not move it at all. We kind of saw this with Cycle Rogue, like where it kind of reinvented itself slightly, or Swarm Shaman in the last meta, where it was like pretty much the same deck, a little bit changed, and then also it's tier 1 again. This deck has one of the cards that I was like, I was so surprised to see it, which is Starport. Like Starport, I looked at like this card and Infestor and just the hero cards in general, but Starport, like I was just like, this card is nuts. Like and every time I play the deck, if I get Starport on 2, I win. If I don't, I have a much, much harder time. But like if you get Starport on curve, it's really a tough deck to deal with. But yeah, otherwise just like good card Shaman. So it'd be hard to nudge it, other than maybe all the hero cards get nudged, and so Jim's a little worse. Like, launch all your starships once per game, something like that, where you address the infinite loop. I'm also kind of surprised that Golganeth never got touched over all this time, because that card's always been like the number 1 card in all of these Shaman decks.
Oh yeah, they always have it on 6.
Always have it on 6.
It's like a mandatory rule. If your opponent is Shaman, they will have the Titan on 6, and it's gonna demolish you.
Yeah. So, but I agree. Maybe we just haven't found the answer yet. But it's a very well-rounded deck. I'd be surprised if it wasn't resilient to a nudge or 2. But for me, the most frustrating part of it is just the infinite nature. Like, it's just gravitating towards this like infinite deck, and I just don't really like those, because at some point I'm just like, I guess I give up. Like you don't actually win the game, but you will if I plays for another 20 minutes. So I guess I just bottom right. Yeah. But I think good card Shaman, I like that, but maybe this is a little too good. Maybe not great card Shaman.
All right.
Yeah, it's a very interesting challenge with this deck, because there's so many cards that are so good, and it revolves around the battlecruiser stuff, and Shaman specifically does it dramatically better than the other 2 Terran classes as far as leveraging the starport and battlecruiser stuff to their advantage. And I think there's just like such a concentration of power in those cards for Shaman. Unless you change like the entire package, I don't see how it gets realistically all that weaker to the point that it even is affected by card changes. But we'll see.
All right. Well, if Terrans seem so strong, and like we kind of alluded to this, why are we playing only Hydration Station and Warrior right now?
I mean, I've seen lots of Starship Warriors, at least in my personal experience, and they're just hydrating really big starships. This is kind of something that they were gravitating towards already, with just Defense Crystal, and now they have even more of a reason to hydrate. You put in an Achilles and you put down a huge starship, and then, oh, guess what? You also go infinite somehow at the end of the game, because you have like 16 mana crystals. Thanks, Druid, to do all this shenanigans. So I think it did improve the deck. If you look at the just like quote unquote mech warriors or whatever that aren't running the starships, they're significantly worse. So it did have an impact. It kept a good deck in a good spot and competitive.
Tito, were you saying like, why aren't we seeing a different starship focused deck that doesn't run Hydration Station?
I'm kind of leading into is Unkyliax really? Why is it still here? Why do we still deal with this? But yeah, why is it like it? Is it really the hydration station the only thing we can do with Warrior? Because it just, I mean, obviously it's the best thing you can do because bringing back your starship and bringing back Unkyliax and bringing back whatever, the starship piece. It's obviously really really good, but why are we here? Like, why is this what we're doing?
I don't know. There's just no reason to do anything different in Warrior, because nothing is remotely close to as competitive. Warrior is like fully pushed in the direction of launch starships and do things with the Terran cards. Otherwise, you would say Warrior didn't get a mini set, and Warrior already wasn't doing well pre-mini set. So the mini set had to be something that revived Warrior's competitive capabilities in some way for people to want to play Warrior at all. And the change of starships being mechs for the Terran classes, which Warrior gets to have, means that they have that massive mech synergy. So Inventor Boom, a card that hasn't been played in a little while, is now incredibly powerful to not only relaunch the Unkyliax that they were always doing before with it, because that's the thing that Warrior is going to do more than any other. They also have Chemical Spill as a card if they choose to try to cheat that out earlier. But they get to relaunch starships or resummon starships with Inventor Boom. They get to launch the starships a little bit cheaper, and they can bring back, those gigantic mechs that, of course, their starships are going to have taunt because they're going to be running the defense crystal. And that's just really powerful things continually coming back from Hydration Station. And it just naturally leads, along with everything else that seems to be happening in the meta, where they push towards that infinite direction, where it's like, okay, well, we're going to be running Fizzle, we're going to be running Ceaseless Expanse, we're going to be running Unkyliax and Starship cards, and we're just going to go infinite, do the thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm. It's one of those.
It's very
decks.
irritating face. I get it.
Yeah, it's one of those decks where maybe it's not the best deck, maybe it's beatable, but when they get that, you're just like, it's just so defeating.
Well, they're not competing with Shaman. Shaman's just better doing at infinite things and every other game situation that can be presented to them than Warrior. So Warrior's win rate doesn't actually look that impressive, but it is a very annoying deck. And when it works, it just wins in such a way that makes people very unhappy. Because there are wins where you're like, or there are losses, I should say, where you're like, oh, I was really close, I almost won that game. And when Warrior beats you, they beat you by extending their health and armor to a point where it looks completely impossibly insurmountable. And with each passing turn, as you stay not conceding, because technically the game's not over yet, you already lost the game like 7 turns ago. But you're sticking it out through a sense of stubbornness, maybe, in a lot of cases where it's better to just recognize they already reached the point in the game where I can never win, and it's better for me to move on. But most, maybe the majority, I would assume, of Hearthstone players don't really do that. Myself included, because I like to have flashy highlight reel plays when we do win the unwinnable game sometimes. But it still very much leads to frustration in those games where, hey, you got like a 5 to 10% chance of winning this game if you stay in it. You already know it's over, but you can play it out if you want to for an additional 10 plus turns, because they're probably not going to kill you all that soon, but they won.
Well, we had No Hands on a couple weeks ago, and he said you stay in those games. So if No Hands says stay in those games, you stay in those games. But
I mean, if you play as well as No Hands, then sure, you might want to stay in those games, especially if you have the mental fortitude of No Hands and it's not going to affect you. But if you're the average Hearthstone player and you have reached that point where it looks very unwinnable, that's probably because it is very unwinnable, and you can preserve your mental health by leaving. That's totally okay.
Absolutely. And I do the same thing. And it, like, the Warrior right now has that same kind of feeling to me like Blood DK used to have, because even when Blood Decay was good for a while, and then it was like tier 3, but even it was like tier 3, when they start playing that Soul Stealer or whatever that clears the board, and all the things that just over and over again, and yeah, it used to just kill me. It used to just be like that. Are we really doing this again? But you know,
Yep.
so why is Paladin so bad?
That's a tough question. Because I think it's a little torn between identities right now. It's not really doing anything well. Kind of looping back to why isn't like aggressive Zerg Hunter doing better? Why isn't Demon Hunter doing better? It's kind of the same challenge for Paladin. It was, the mini set gave them a go wide, incentive, and going wide isn't really great right now unless you've got like bouncers or something that with like really big butts. And even though they're 2/2s, it's still pretty easily cleared. So, there's the one Crusader Aura Starship deck, which is it's reasonable. It's a reasonable deck. But a lot of the other decks fell off pretty hard, except for like hand buff is fine, because you still have charge damage you can send at face. But I feel like that deck's getting worse. But yeah, I mean, at least for the mini set, they try to push a go wide strategy, which isn't really great right now. I try to build like an Inventor's Aura deck, because Mech Paladin Wild has been historically kind of a broken deck with if you discount everything by one and you just dump your hand. The problem with that approach is that you dumped your hand and you don't have any reload. So like you do the thing once and it's really flashy and awesome, but it just doesn't win the game if it gets cleared. So it's just kind of like a meta state right now. We're going wide and trying to put a Crusader's Aura on everything is like okay-ish, like probably tier 2. But you get cleared once and then you kind of delete the deck and move on to something a little more resilient.
Yeah, because it feels really bad when your chance of winning just gets wiped out because you kind of, by nature of the deck, need to go all in on it. Hand buff looks very bad to me right now, at least in terms of like top 1k legend. It is horrifically unplayable. At different ranks and on the climb to legend, it's still doing fine. But it's the same old thing that it has been for a very long time. And I figure that still doesn't really draw a whole lot of interest in players as well. But like, I don't know, it's kind of okay. Just know that the higher you climb with hand buff Paladin, the worse it's going to perform. And the only other Paladin deck that seems to be out there as a possibility is, like you mentioned, the deck, I think it was Glory who pioneered it. It's at least where I saw it. And, it does Starship things. It goes wide. It runs multiple 4-mana cards that leverage a wider board in Crusader, Aura, Flash Sale, and Hellion, which does require you to launch a Starship first, but you can still do that for very cheap with all the additional Terran cards that came out to have that active and able to go on turn 4 in a lot of cases. And it can go really fast. If you run into an opponent that's doing kind of nothing, they might just be dead by turn 4, turn 3 sometimes even. But anybody who clears your board in the early game, all of a sudden, you are really struggling. You do have multiple ways still to flood some more. There's some other late game payoff things that you can do with Raynor if you wait and build up a Starship a little bit stronger. But at the end of the day, it kind of just does one thing and does it pretty well. And I think Paladin suffers from the problem that almost every class not named Shaman suffers from right now, which is you might be fine in most of your games that you queue until you queue into a Shaman, and then you're probably going to lose. I was doing well with Glory's Paladin on stream the other night, and I was commenting on it, how I was like, the most OP thing about this deck is its ability to not queue into Shaman, because I had like 5 consecutive games where I didn't queue into a single Shaman. And then we broke the streak. I won like every game but one of those, I think. And then we broke the streak by queuing into a Shaman. Instant loss. Not even close. And I mean, I called it the second that I queued into the Shaman. I was like, oh crap, we lost now. That's just how it is. Shaman's insanely well-rounded and incredibly powerful. and has tools to either, you know, pressure if it has to in some cases, like usually through a battleship after they cleared all your stuff, or just answer every single thing that you do to try to kill them throughout the entire game. So Paladin can't really do anything when it queues into the stronger stuff. But it's fine in terms of like an aggressive game plan. If your opponent doesn't find one of the cards that they need for the specific early game situation, Paladin often wins, and that's how they win. And if they do have the card, GG.
That's fair.
Time to move on.
And the shaman right now kind of feels like Habu Gabu shaman used to feel like to me. There was always kind of like ways to find a win, and it's an interesting, fun deck. But aside from the fact that the best deck is Battlecruiser Shaman, and why would you not, if you're playing Shaman, why would you not play that? Can we still play Asteroids? Final question. Just curious.
So overall,
I mean, you're allowed to.
Yeah, you could queue it up, but overall, I think that touches back to what Ron said originally, is that the Oracle nerf like really turned the meta on its head. I kind of saw the Oracle nerf and be like, okay, Asteroid Shaman's kind of unplayable, and that was my little darling deck that I loved, and try to push with like the more proactive version, but it's just, it's a deck that really relied on a lot of damage off board from spells, and the Oracle nerf hurt that in an enormous way. One of the things actually I want to note on that surprised me a lot is like, oh, well, Linessa Paladin, that seems like it should be a pretty reasonable deck. It was strong before, didn't really rely on Oracle. I queued it up and it felt awful. Like, it was surprising to me how much draw that Oracle gave. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a definitely a different, feels like a different meta, a lot more, a lot less like Oracle into Insidious stuff specifically, where you were seeing that like in almost every deck. Now it's a lot more feels like you have to fight for the board, and so things like the defense crystal, you actually have to punch through it, and it's a bummer. I really liked Asteroids, but I think it's going to take a back seat for an indefinite amount of time.
I did as well, and I probably should not have brought up Asteroids and Paladin as the last few things, because I know I'm sad going into the outro here. But given that we are now, normally I say, hey, Doc, I think it's time for dessert. Yeah, that sounds good. Great. Given that we're talking about a different game inside of Hearthstone, I want to know, what's your favorite non-Hearthstone game, Ron?
So I really like playing sports games. I used to do a whole lot of it, and I was a huge fan of college football, specifically, which never returned after like 2014. There was just no college football game for like 10 years, but it's back. There was a big name, image, and likeness deal that happened, and now there's a college football game again, and I've been playing that. I really like it. I do a little bit of that in my free time, but I don't really do a whole lot of gaming outside of Hearthstone anymore. I mostly just try to spend time with my partner. She's a nurse, and we have tricky night shift related schedules, so we try to just spend time with each other, which involves much less gaming on my part.
Well, at least you have Bailey to hang out with now. World 8, what's your favorite outside of Hearthstone game?
So my spouse and I picked up a lot of board games during quarantine. So we kind of rotate through a lot of those, some like heavier stuff that's like 2 hour plus board games. So I right now, I think my favorite of them is a game called Everdell. You are building this town of really cute woodland creatures, and it feels like it's really slow at first, and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't have space for all of my creatures. And it also helps that like we played a game the other night with my wife's cousin and his girlfriend, and I won, and I didn't think I was gonna win. I was like, I don't have enough points to win, and then I did, and that felt really great. So top of my list right now for like the surprise win, I think.
Fair enough. And since we're talking about it, where can people find you, World 8, on social media?
Still pretty much the same as it's been. The best place to find me is on Discord if you want to chat about Hearthstone. Just simply World 8 with the letters, not the numbers. And then on Twitch, I'll do a stream every once in a while, world8_HS. And usually pretty involved on Twitter too, not so much anymore, but also world8_HS.
Are you still doing your Sunday nights with Tex?
No, we both kind of lost interest in Hearthstone for a little bit, so maybe we'll get back to that.
How about yourself, Mr. Mexico? Where can people find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at Ron_HS, where I don't really ever tweet about anything except for saying I'm going live on Twitch. And then you can find me on Twitch streaming Monday through Friday around 7 p.m. Eastern at RonMexicoHS.
And since we're already talking, you got any shout outs or anything you'd like to promote this week?
I'll let you guys go first for the shout outs.
World 8.
Sure. I mean, I'm going to give a shout out to my little son who went through surgery, and he's been a real trooper this last week. He doesn't have the communication, but I can tell he's toughing it out as much as you can understand from him. So I have to give him a shout out for being a tough little cookie.
And I'm going to shout out my friend Claire, who was also I went to college with, who is a former healer in my World of Warcraft guild for many, many, many years. I'm very good at it. And now I'm sleeping in a spare room. So thank you, Claire. You're amazing. How about yourself, Ron?
I would also like to give a shout out to World 8 Son, because it sounds like he's going through a lot. But I think he's in great hands because he's got a really good dad. So I think he's going to do just fine.
Very nice. I like the way you played that. Anyway, guys, I think we're toast. We'll see you. Bye.
All right. See ya.
Slide two brothers meet one another when they slide up to the mic. It's bread and butter with one another. Let's start up that recording light.